Hey, if everyone is ready, we'll start with the commissioner.
Thank you. Good afternoon at this point. I'll tell you, one of the experiences last year is I walked out of the large room and I had this schedule and they brought me here. And I was told literally as I walked in, you need to make some opening remarks. And so I was a bit of deer in headlights. So it's good to be with you, and I've got a couple of thoughts to share, and then we'll offer some opportunity for questions. I talked in my remarks this morning about a few issues. One, our sharing in the sorrow at the loss of life that's been such a focus over the last week, and that's done with the understanding that sports play a unifying role in society, but beyond that, the opportunity, the effort to change as individuals is also central. Commented about my visits, my discussions with student athletes, and really the great feedback. While they are talking about how they balance their time, they're also enormously committed to succeeding from an educational standpoint, but they know they came and they're part of the Southeastern Conference to challenge themselves competitively, and they want us to find how best to strike that balance. We've got a number of young men here from a football standpoint that have done incredible things, and while others want to talk about a very few number of individuals who've done bad things, who've stepped across lines and should be held accountable, that's the weight of our success is better defined and a much more appropriate focus on the many great things being done by young people or student athletes. So with those introductory comments, we'll open it up for questions.
Mr. Commissioner Tony Cornish Jr., WTVY-TV in Dothan, talk about overall your responsibility or the role you feel you have as Commissioner of the Southeastern Conference in addressing these social issues that many of our student athletes, your student athletes, face each and every day on campus, what you're doing to send the word out, the message out about where this conference is in fact, in trying to empower those student athletes to feel more than just athletes on campus, but more of a total student body experience for them.
Yeah, it's interesting if you look over the last year, we've had young people engaged in leadership roles on campuses. I can communicate about those. I think our campuses provide opportunities. There's incredible diversity on each of our university campuses. Within our teams, maybe some of the most diverse combination of people that we see in society, and yet they come together around a common cause. I think, personally, there's an opportunity to talk very openly about that, to praise what is done, not just in the Southeastern Conference, although that's where my responsibility lies, but around campuses across the country, and yet to make sure we've got the right kind of dialogue taking place so that we've got relationships, we've got understanding, and we continue to grow individually so that we can avoid maybe some of the challenges presented right now.
To follow up, if I can very quickly, what did you feel or learn from the incidents at Missouri from last week?
Well, we're criticized for young people not being engaged on campus, yet there may be no better example of full and total engagement on campus issues than what happened last fall at Missouri. My next observation is we don't want those types of things to happen in that manner. I think our student athletes can and do show leadership. My encouragement to university leaders and to athletics department leaders and to coaches is to make sure you're in constant conversation, understanding what's on the hearts and minds, who's around them, and how might we participate in meeting some of our cultural challenges.
Joe Allen, WBMA TV in Birmingham. Obviously, you kind of touched on this a little bit already, the issues with student athletes off the field, that's few and far between those cases, but has there ever been any consideration to a conference-wide standardized set of punishments, suspensions, rather than leaving it up to individual schools?
We've adopted a transfer misconduct policy, so we've instituted that on a conference-wide basis. There are conversations, but there's a recognition that our universities make independent decisions. They are their own body. They're part of the Southeastern Conference, and that's the appropriate place as a result of those conversations.
Back here to your left.
Mac McAllister, WEAR, Pensacola. And the recent rulings of the satellite camps that are now going on and reversal, how are your feelings as the commissioner, and how are you guys are handling it now?
Well, I expected to be asked a satellite camp question much earlier in my day, so you're the first, and I want it for the record that you asked, I didn't introduce. And our view on satellite camps from the beginning was very clearly NCAA rules don't permit recruiting during off-campus summer camps. That wasn't even a matter for debate, yet these matters had persisted, and it really became a shift in the recruiting calendar about which none of us had a conversation. There had been no vote on that. It just emerged, and we think that was the wrong direction. Now, I can offer any number of solutions that probably don't allow, based on the amount of tape you might have in your camera or amount of megabytes in the modern day. But I was at least encouraged when you look at the board of directors outcome at the NCAA level. They really acknowledged our concerns. And Bob Bowlesby, a couple weeks ago out of a meeting of the Football Oversight Committee, I think his quote that these camps are a mess. So we need to be attentive, and we need to see some change.
Right back to you.
Commissioner Tatum Everett, KTBS out of Shreveport, Louisiana. In light of the recent sexual abuse scandals involving college athletics, LSU has just implemented requiring sexual harassment sensitivity training and awareness for every collegiate athlete coach in their program. Is this something that the conference is looking at doing as well?
It's interesting. We actually have provided that type of training over a number of years. We had a partnership with a program called Mentors in Violence Prevention that related to violence, particularly violence against women, and encouraging bystanders to become involved actively at solving problems and preventing those issues up front. King Alexander, LSU's president, shared the plans for the program with our conference leadership at our spring meetings. You can understand that each of our campuses provides different levels of training to different groups, but each is attentive, and it is interesting and encouraging to see the leadership that LSU has taken on the matter.
Greg, you've had a year now. Tell me what is different about this job. Maybe you didn't expect that. You were kind of a sergeant at arms, so you saw a lot of it. And then also, I know you like to grow and evolve as a commissioner. So who is in your camp? Who do you try to be accountable to beyond school presidents and those kind of things?
So let me take the first one, which is what's different than maybe what I expected. You can be very close, which I have been, and see and watch and observe, but until you sit in the chair of leadership, you don't understand that role of leadership. And of anything from a big picture, it is that the demands are continuous. People are attentive to the words you use and what you say. And I moved from being an advisor to being a decision maker or the decision maker on many issues in our office. And that started rapidly last year, like week one on some significant issues. And we had the shootings in Charleston last year, and a position communicated from my perspective on the Confederate battle flag. That was a decision point. We had the flooding in Columbia, South Carolina, and I asked what happened in the SEC when that kind of situation occurred before, and the answer was it's never happened before. So now you've got to make a decision, and so you make the informed one. I actually began a program a year ago with Deloitte Consulting, believe it or not, on CEO transition. And so the short-term answer on personal development and accountability outside of the bubble of the SEC has been to partner with Deloitte Consulting in that role. And it's been really eye-opening because they provide that for CEOs, generally of Fortune 500 type companies. And they obviously have an interest in the Southeastern Conference, but I had people from Boston and from the New York metropolitan area and Charlotte who participated in just guiding, discussing, helping me think in a little bit different way.
This is going back a few weeks. In response to Jeffrey Simmons' enrollment at Mississippi State, I believe you phrased it as you wouldn't classify the SEC stance as being comfortable. Is there any degree of punishment or any action from Mississippi State that would have had you feeling more comfortable?
Well, that becomes really a hypothetical of what if. Mississippi State made a decision. They looked into a young man's background. I'm not one who thinks that 5 seconds of video should define one's life. And what that young man has is an opportunity. He's going to be closely scrutinized. That is not behavior that is acceptable in any way, but the conference doesn't have a role in making that decision. That's not been assigned to the commissioner.
Right back here to the corner.
Hey, Commissioner. Chris Price, WBRZ in Baton Rouge. Last year, LSU had their first home game rained out against McNeese State. There have been other games that haven't been able to be made up over the course of recent years. Is there any way to better handle that than to say, well, if you don't play it then, tough luck? Can there be a rain-out date or something like that?
I guess you could build domes. But part of the beauty of being in this conference is being outdoors for football games. Short of that, I would observe it's an outdoor sport, and if we're gonna err on the side of safety of the fans and the players. We have collectively, as a conference, come together, and the conference office has a role now in securing a game cancellation insurance so that we're prepared when those unique situations arise, if they arise. But the way the football schedule is structured, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room. There's one open week this week, and things would really have to sync up miraculously to make it work when you have kind of those individual situations.
What does the insurance entail?
Well, I'm the wrong one to ask that. But if you have a game canceled, it provides at least a base for lost revenue around that.
Commissioner, can you shed a little light on the progress of the SEC network, how you're incorporating the growth of the network, the expansion of it possibly to other areas?
Well, a couple of things. The SEC network is concluding its second full year. Like both of those years have shown continuing progress. We went from 1,000 live events that were televised through the SEC network in year one to 1,600 events. That's really a tribute to our campuses. We have been very pleased through our relationship with ESPN that the production quality of our games and of the content, SEC Storied, SEC Now, SEC Nation, SEC Inside, I'm sure I'm leaving some programming out, but each of those are at a standard that is second to none. I think that we will continue, as we did, particularly this past year, to look at telling the stories around the young people who are part of the SEC on a regular basis, in games, at events. I think that's an important opportunity in a way that we can use that platform in an innovative way.
Right back here.
Hi, Jenna Caleri, WLTZ in Columbus, Georgia. I'm actually going to ask you about the Olympics this summer. A lot of current and former SEC athletes representing the U.S. in the Olympic Games later in August. How exciting is it to see so many athletes from this conference represent the U.S. in those games?
It's incredibly exciting. All of a sudden, you're part of that activity in a personal way, and any number of those young people, especially the current student athletes, I've had the opportunity to meet around our track and field championships. Arkansas won each of our trophies this year, indoor and outdoor, and I had the opportunity to meet their entire team. And so you can see Jerry and Lawson, if I have the name right, and long jump and in sprints, doing exceedingly well. Last night, the heptathlon, I spoke about that. An 800-meter event that's not your strength, that will determine whether you're part of the United States Olympic team or not, and the full-out effort given, and fractions of a second being the difference. And the exhaustion, the joy, the relief. It's pretty cool to watch, even on a TV set, knowing that they're there as part of young people who are either now enrolled or have been enrolled in the Southeastern Conference.
We have time for a few more questions. Marissa, front row.
I know it's not basketball season, but the success of football is unprecedented. How do you try to what elements do you take of this to build basketball, because it's happened in gymnastics and softball and other sports like you talked about, track and field?
There are 5, if you will, building blocks that are in place now that were not in place last year. One is Mark Fox, Georgia's men's basketball coach, is now a member of the NCAA Rules Committee. It's been a long time since we've had someone in that role. Joe Oliva has done really good work the last 5 years as a member of the NCAA Basketball Committee on the men's side. Mitch Barnhart, the Kentucky AD, will move right into that. In fact, they meet this week. And then we've had 3 personnel changes around our office, bringing Mike Tranghese in as a special advisor, enormously helpful just for conversation and perspective. Again, from outside the SEC looking in. We have Dan Leibovitz. Dan started last week as our associate commissioner for men's basketball, and he brings coaching experience from the collegiate level for a number of years. He's been a head coach at Division I, worked in the NBA with what were then the Charlotte Bobcats, Charlotte Hornets, I think, one of the Charlotte franchise. Yeah, you got me on tape with that. And then has been the last few years the associate commissioner in the American Athletic Conference, leading their administrative effort, and they've had success in accessing the NCAA tournament. And then it changed to Mark Whitehead. So Mark's a guy people don't know, but as soon as they see him, he's officiated at such a high level in basketball. What all that does, I think, is provide a foundation. We have 5 people in key positions, both in our office, from our campuses, and then leading our officiating program that provides energy. The reality is you have to win games. And we'll continue to talk about how we improve upon that competitive performance. I think we're really close. If you really look at men's basketball, we want top 50 teams, but we had a lot of teams from 50 to 75 in the RPI. And we need to shift those 4 or 5 teams forward about 15 ratings positions, and then you have a much different story to tell because we are close.
Back here.
To your left. Commissioner, I'm Dick Gabriel, WKYT in Lexington. Facilities have grown rather impressively in the SEC through the years, and quickly, kind of an arms race, and they cost an extraordinary amount of money. And given the cost of education across the country now, there's some grumbling that goes on campuses. You feel like this is healthy for the SEC? Is it growing too fast? Are they spending too much money? Is it an arms race that might not be healthy for college athletics ultimately?
Well, I don't view it necessarily as an arms race. I think a lot of people use that term. You have facilities for teams, and there's been a lot of great work, I think, done at the University of Kentucky that provides the platform where our student athletes compete. They train, they compete. Our fans are part of that. We've been fortunate to be in a position where there's positive revenue flows. Our administrators need to use that wisely, and I think they have. They're judicious as they make decisions, but care has to be applied to the decision-making process. We can't assume things will always be as they have been. And that's whether that's our personal life and personal finances or in our work. I know certainly there are others that take enormous amounts of money through student fees and from campus sources, and we have some of that, but relatively speaking, it's minimal compared to the total scope of what's used to support our athletic programs. And I think those are healthy aspects that are present in the SEC.
Far right.
Commissioner, kind of on that note, big picture, what does SEC football look like 5 or 10 years down the road from right now?
Well, it would be wonderful if we were here and had won 5 or 6 consecutive national championships. One of the constants in life is change. So you can assume that SEC football in 5 or 6 years will be different than today. There may be different leadership in certain positions, different coaches. We'll have different players, certainly, different rules. Yet there's a long history in this league of commitment and interest and success in the sport of football, and I don't expect that to change at all.
Final question right here.
Commissioner Mark Freeman, WAAY out of Huntsville. This year you had a tremendous amount of programs in the NCAA tournament for baseball. The amount of scholarships that are available for that sport, have any administrators or schools or even coaches is that a topic brought up about the number of scholarships and trying to increase that for schools?
Do I count as an administrator? Because I've identified that issue for conversation. Our coaches certainly have. Now, keep in mind that 11.7 also has other different forms of aid depending on our states. There may be institutional aid that does not count in the team's limits that young people are able to access. You may have some of the state lottery scholarships in a number of our states that add to that. That's not universal or present in every state. There may be need-based resources that help fill needs. So we need to be careful when we just talk about the numbers. But the scholarship model in really all equivalency sports is one that I think is rightfully the subject of conversation in each of our coaches' meetings.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. You know, the other thing I learned last year, this won't be quotable, is literally I go from community to community. So we went from like Shreveport to Baton Rouge to Dothan, back to Birmingham, to Pensacola. Where else have we been today? That's just one of those experiences that if you ask me about what's different, you know, when I go to Radio Row, I'll cover 11 states in about 35 minutes. That's pretty good travel time.